Joe talks about Joe. And now, your host, Joe Slepsky.
Hello again, everybody. It's me, your host, Joe Slepsky, and welcome back to Joe on Joe. This is the only podcast where I've covered every episode of the G.I. Joe Sunbow cartoon, DIC. We've done Extreme in every issue of the Marvel Real American Hero comic book, page by page, panel by panel. Now, this week is another episode of You on Joe, and You on Joe is where you, the listener, the G.I. Joe fan, you are the guest, you're the focus. Your specific favorite thing about the G.I. Joe is up for discussion, so I want you to be on this show. Whatever it is you love about G.I. Joe. Is it one specific character? Is it an episode that you've watched over and over again? Is it the movie? Is it the live action movies? Is it the video games? Whatever it is that you love about G.I. Joe, I want to hear about it from you. We've had such a great diversity of topics and guests, and that is because you guys are driving it. If it were left up to me, it would be me alone in a room, which you guys got for 2 years. So I want to hear from you. Please reach out and participate and be a guest on You on Joe. Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, you can reach me at Joe on Joe Pod, or you can send me an email to joeandjoepod@gmail.com and let me know what topic you'd like to cover. It's really easy to do. You can join on your phone. You can join on your computer. It's all you need. And while you're online, please give me a rate and review on your podcast app. Every single review helps grow the show. If you're so inclined, you can also visit my Patreon page at patreon.com/JoeOnJoePod. There you'll find the full selection of every episode of Joe on Joe that we've ever recorded, including the first 50 issues of Joe on Joe Illustrated, which have never been on the main feed. Now, speaking of sponsorship, I've had a fabulous sponsor, the Movies in a Meal podcast. They've supported this show for many years, so I want you guys to really give them a follow, give them a listen. You're going to enjoy their podcast. In the beginning of time, the smallest organism gained sentience and thought to itself, I really need a good meal. Then, a bunch of other stuff happened, and finally the Lumiere brothers started showing movies in France. This was all the inspiration that fellow broadcasters Brad, Keith, and Ben needed to combine these two primal needs into the Movies in a Meal podcast. The Movies in a Meal is one of the most casual and relaxing film talk podcasts you could ever listen to. These three friends enjoy a good meal together while talking all about the movies. And not just reviews. They do favorite lists, comparison discussions, genre talks, anything and everything that you can think of. They've even broken their solemn promise inherent in the name and branched out into TV talk. So I love the variety of films they bring to the table. They cover new releases, classics, cult films, often in one episode. It's really a delight to listen to, and it has something for every movie fan out there to enjoy. So if you're looking to grow your podcast library, if you eat meals, and if you've ever seen a movie, then you should give Ben, Keith, and Brad a listen and subscribe to the Movies in a Meal podcast. They've been a great sponsor to this show. I love the Movies in a Meal podcast, and I'd like all of you to love them too. Okay, gang, there are very few people that I know with more toy knowledge than my guest today. I don't say that lightly. Not only is he a massive G.I. Joe expert with a huge, expansive collection of both G.I. Joe and other toys, but his overall knowledge of the market, the history of toys, the way they were manufactured, the way they're distributed, it runs so deep. Any questions that I ever have about not only G.I. Joe, but any toy line, Jeremiah Stafford always has the answers for me. He is a font of knowledge, and I am so pleased to call him my friend and have him on my show this week. When I asked Jeremiah to be on the show, his choice was, hands down, the 1984-85 G.I. Joe catalog. And I could not agree with him more. It is fabulous. As you're going to hear on this episode, this was the catalog that launched the brand into the absolute stratosphere. Jared and I break down each of the items on this catalog and what they meant to us. It turned into a really personal, beat-by-beat memory lane travel of our childhood Joe collections. In fact, it took us a full hour to get through the entire part of side one, at which I decided we're going to split this into two parts. So the 84-85 G.I. Joe calendar with Jeremiah Stafford, part one, is right now. I know you're going to enjoy this conversation as much as we did having it. So the 84-85 catalog, yeah, it is when G.I. Joe blew up, right?
I mean, this to me, this was the year I fell in love with the franchise. I and I really feel like this is the year where it started to find the identity that it is now most associated with.
Mm-hmm.
Going back to like 82, so many great things going on in 82, and I certainly understand people that fell in love with it right out the gate. But to some degree, for me, at that point, it was Green Army Men versus Blue Army Men.
Right.
The artwork was incredible from the beginning. The figure construction was incredible from the beginning. It had those great commercials for the Marvel Comics that was just so, instantly grabbing. But it wasn't until you really got into 84, but you see like the diversity, and that this goes beyond, Green Army Men and Blue Army Men in a really fully realized way.
Mm-hmm.
Still grounded, still not totally into the sci-fi realm. But, this felt to me like this was the year where, I love superheroes. So for me, like G.I. Joe and superheroes are my 1A and 1B in terms of fandom.
Yeah.
And this was where G.I. Joe went from just being a military line to being S.H.I.E.L.D., being the Avengers, being, having that type of thing where it is, these grounded heroes going up against Batman's rogue gallery in just an amazing way. So yeah, 84 just really, really was the year I jumped in.
That rings so true. I agree 100%. And you had said, I want to do the 84-85 catalog. And my brain was trying to remember that. And as soon as you sent me the photos of it, I flashed back immediately to how much I loved this catalog. For listeners, for your reference, this is the one with Duke on the cover and Zartan on the. Is it? So what I'm looking at is it is purposely offset folded, right? So if you're looking at it completely as they wanted you to look at it, you would see Duke on the left side, and then like on the offset underside, you'd see Zartan kind of coming from behind, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So they both, Duke basically folds over to where Zartan sort of peeks out a little bit, but he's still
such a subtle, smart thing. You're telling people that he's the bad guy without even showing that he's the bad guy because he's sneaking up from behind, right?
Yes.
He's not
100%.
Yeah, he's not the head guy. He's not the front because we didn't know who Zartan was. This was Zartan's debut.
And yeah, I mean, this is the year where, again, and part of it is because of his catalog. Like Duke is my favorite Joe and Zartan is my favorite Cobra.
Makes sense.
And that artwork was just, it's the, Hector Garrido style art, or not style, his art. And I think it is one of the best examples. I mean, that Duke image is just so iconic.
Yeah. And,
again, like this is the Captain America of G.I. Joe. This is that guy. And Zartan, I just love everything about him. Like the always love a bad guy in a hood, be it the Grim Reaper, the Ghost of Future Present, of Christmas Future Present, Doctor Doom, like a guy in a hood, I'm in. And then you add that sort of Gene Simmons Kiss makeup, and you add that, color changing ability and the fact that he's sort of, has his own interest and motivation going and gets really developed as a character, like just everything about Zartan. And yeah, like the play feature, of the color changing. Didn't do it all the time. Wasn't something that got in the way of playing with the toy, but it was just a cool thing that you could do. And so many play features sort of mess with the aesthetic of the toy or mess with the playability of the toy. It's going to punch, but that means you can't do any ever motion with it.
Mm-hmm.
But this color change feature was just like, oh no, if you like it, here you can use it. If you don't, just play in your room.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. I used to park Zartan in my window on the second floor bedroom, just to get that's kind of where he lived, to get as much color change as possible. But I want to touch on something you mentioned first, where it was really the demarcation line between the green guys versus blue guys When you look at so 82, we all know, everyone's green, everything's real military. 83 gave us more really real military stuff. We had the Dragonfly, the APC, the command center, which is obviously amazing. Jump jetpack, you have the Sky Striker introduced in 83, the Wolverine, which is, just another version of it, like a Mobat style thing. These are all real military looking things, a twin battle gun. But then you get a touch of it with the Polar Battle Bear, where it's a little more snowmobile than it is military vehicle, right?
Well, and really for me, absolutely with the vehicles, you start to get little hints of it. Yeah. But, really for me, like, as I said, 84 was when I got in, but 83, I was tempted to go back because of things like Destro and things like Snow Job. Snow Job's still grounded looking, but he was at least different.
Yeah.
And those guys coming out in 83 caught my eye, because I think at that point, somewhere, 82 was a Masters of the Universe Christmas for me. And, 83, at some point I picked up a Grunt and a Snake Eyes, thinking Snake Eyes was a member of Cobra because his name is Snake Eyes and he's in black and why not? And then realizing, I made a mistake. So I grabbed a Cobra Trooper, somewhere down the line. And then that was it. And I played with him a couple times, didn't really get that much into it. Destro started to make me interested again. But really it was this. There still just wasn't quite there. It was halfway there.
Yeah.
And 84 is when it fully got there.
Right. And continuing just the vehicle movement, and we're going to go through this catalog and talk about all the vehicles specifically that are on it. But just looking like on a yojo.com kind of thing. When you see the vehicles that came out in 84, the Whale, while green military, it also was pretty wild.
That's your super vehicle.
Yeah.
It's got motorcycles that can drive off of it. It's got every sort of missile and bomb.
Completely. You have the Skyhawk included in this line, which doesn't look like any vehicle I've still seen to this day.
Right.
But that's cool. So you're like, okay, that's a little futuristic. That's a little like day-to-day utilitarian military vehicle. You have the Shark, which goes underwater and flies, right? Yeah. The most military vehicle in all these that I'm looking at is the Rattler, which was the A-10 Warthog, which
is a vehicle out of time.
Yeah, that's from right. That was an old World War II kind of, or 50s thing, right? Like from Korean War or Vietnam.
It would have been probably Korea.
Yeah. So these vehicles that were coming out or the Cobra Claw, the motorized back, because previous year you had the gliders, which were actually just gliders. And you're like, oh, okay, I could see that. No. Now we're going to strap jetpacks on, even though I know we had the jump, but you're going to strap jetpacks on a winged vehicle that in the cartoon we were seeing them just fly everywhere with, right? So all these things really take it past that regular everyday military level. We also have the inclusion this year of all the battlefield accessories and the battle stations and all these little mini play sets, right? Which, while being very military, they add just more realism to it.
And also, for kids, fleshing it out too from just what in the industry you think of in terms of SKUs. But, you have access points now that you didn't have as much in the previous 2 years. You got these little play sets, to where if you can't get the G.I. Joe headquarters, you can still build your world at an affordable price,
And if you did have it, this was a branch off that tree.
Augmentation for it that was amazing. Yeah.
I mean, and looking, again, we'll go through them in detail, but when you look at all the figures that were released that year, 84, I almost said Ricardo, but Ricardo definitely is in that field. I'm looking at Ripcord. He's the most green shirty of them all. Maybe I guess without Thunder, with the exception he and Thunder being the driver, but Ripcord's the most green shirty of them all. And when you really, that's just looking at his figure, but his figure came with all the the face mask and the helmet and the back, the parachutes, which then blew him up as an awesome figure. So no one is really green shirty in this line of Joes. Even Roadblock, who's he's rocking this T-neck,
right,
undershirt thing. Like, he's not really green shirty either. So you're right. This is when it blew up. Like, they put their toe in the water in 82 or in 83. They probably saw that, well, wow, those ones, the peculiar looking ones, the fresh guys really sold well, and they blew it up in 84.
And again, it's the perfect balance, because they're not just army men, but they're not so outrageous. This is especially on the Joe side.
Yeah.
Cobra side too, as I said, they can be more like a Batman villain to a degree.
Correct. And their personalities too. The personalities are reflected through these costumes we're looking at, wherein I think, I'll say this later down the road, and we've actually, in a way, talked about this a lot, where once they start getting into designing the figure and I'm not going to presuppose I knew what was going on in their heads, but knowing that they took figures that were made for one thing and then repurposed them to another, or, the more they started reusing body parts from other people, the less individual and unique you get to the look of a character and their role in the thing. Right. So almost all these guys, as you look down the row, the look they have matches near 100% to who they are and what their role is on the team. You can't really say that for the later years.
And I think definitely that's part of why these, the figures from this era, and I'll include 85 in there and looking forward, but are some of the most iconic in the long run of this franchise. Like, that's every one of them. The artwork pops, the figure construction pops, and their characters. They
really are. Yeah, character first. And Jeremiah, you're a screenwriter. As a writer, that's how you make your trade. Character first. Character is what hooks people in. The adventure may get you on a short brief. Wow, that was exciting. I didn't think that would happen, but that doesn't necessarily bring you back every week, because you can't surprise everyone every single week with every single twist and turn. You're going to run out of plots, right? You're going to run out of MacGuffins. But if you get the characters going and you get the personalities interacting with each other in a fun way, whether it's via the actual cartoon we were all watching or via the file cards that were crossing over with each other, when you add that character bit in, now they look visually like that character. It cements in your brain going, oh yeah, that dude is this. And what a great adventure you can then have with it.
And also too, with the expansion of his line, you got, and I mean, to some degree, there was some of this if you were reading the comics, but in 84, I wasn't reading the comics. But you as this line is expanding, you get a lot more interesting relationships coming into it.
Yeah.
Like, everybody's sort of got, people that you can identify as like, oh, that person's a really good friend with such and such. That person kind of rubs this person the wrong way.
Nothing better than leatherneck and wetsuit, man.
Oh yeah.
Nothing better.
But, you start to see it here beyond just the, romantic relationships, which are great, and which are like cornerstones of any franchise. But, you start to see like friendships develop and rivalries develop. And, Zartan and Destro want to sort of be number two, and really resent, any attention everyone gets from Cobra Commander. But at the same time, they also are willing to cross Cobra Commander. So,
and all the Dreadnoks want is respect from Zartan.
Right.
They just want his approval.
Loyalty. That doesn't run all the way up the chain.
No, it does not. Absolutely not. They will just do whatever Zartan wants them to do. And if they make Zartan happy, they're fine. And then that gets challenged when Zarana rolls around.
Yes.
Because now it's, oh, wait, she's as, forward personality wise as Zartan is. So do we now give this respect to her? So now there's a challenge to Zartan's leadership, none of the Dreadnoks ever thinking that they could be their own person, which is fabulous.
Right.
So let's dig into this. Let's dig into the actual guts of what we're talking about today, which is the physical catalog from 84-85. So we talked about the cover, And then we're gonna flip it over to the inside the Joe side first. It starts with the GI Joe command center.
So, one of the interesting things, and probably like if you were a child of the 80s, maybe you remember this, but back then, the way the cycle of the toy releases worked was, they were always gearing up for Christmas, obviously, but usually the new offerings would show up kind of late summer, early fall. That way they'd be in all the stores and ready to go by Christmas season, or when parents start shopping, So, and it all depended on your region. But like for me, if it was like a Toys R Us, they'd usually start to leak in each year around July. Walmarts and Kmarts might get it closer to August or September. And then September, if it had a cartoon, that's when your cartoon's going to kick off. And that way everything sort of lined up so that when Christmas shopping starts around October, it's there on the shelves.
Mm-hmm.
But on top of that, you had 2 years to buy anything that was in the main line. So like, for instance, Baroness coming out in 84 is a summer release that would run from 84 to 85. She would be reoffered in 85 to 86.
Mm-hmm.
Same time that Flint would come out and Bazooka would come out.
Right.
And so that's the thing too, is you see here a mix on this catalog of both the 83 offerings, which is like the GI Joe headquarters, that we're starting with was an 83 offer that's still there in 84. And that was always like as a kid, that was always the trade-off is, if you had a couple bucks, you'd go in and buy a Joe. Do you buy that brand new one that like you've never seen before and you're really curious to find out about them?
Mm-hmm.
Or do you buy the one that is about to go away?
Oh, yeah.
Because you've only got.
Yeah, I think I twigged onto that go away part later in the game because there were a lot of green shirts. I absolutely remember seeing green shirts when I got into Joe, which would have been around this time. I was about 10, so 9 or 10. So that was like 84 for me, 85, like my literally first exposure to them. So Snake Eyes being my first figure, V1. So when I first looked at G.I. Joe, like I believe Zartan was out. I think, Destro was definitely on the stands. And I was seeing these flashier dudes. Snowjob was actually my second guy. So it probably was late 83. And then I got a Breaker. And while I love Breaker as an adult, as a kid, I was like, well, he's kind of boring. Look at these two dope dudes. So I did not have a lot of the green shirts because in comparison, they weren't as exciting. And not having any idea that they were going to go away. And I was never, and fast forward, you're going to be paying $50 to $60 a piece as an adult to fill out your green shirts.
And I didn't realize it specifically in 84. I think by 85 or 86, I was fully aware that was the pattern. But no, likewise, not realizing that. And also, as I said, really not falling in love with it till 84, which means I've already missed half my window.
It's like we had to see them go away in order to learn the lesson is really what it is. I remember the same cycle with He-Man. He-Man might have been actually the first, because I was way into He-Man too in 82. I was into He-Man, I believe, before G.I. Joe. And I think I saw that cycle happen there. Because I distinctly remember that I always wanted a Prince Adam. And when they came out with Prince Adam, I was like, I'm getting him now. I'm getting him before he leaves. We're buying Prince Adam. Like that was it. I at one point I had asked my aunt who made custom Barbie clothes, who made a living making custom Barbie clothes. They were gorgeous, to make me a Prince Adam outfit to put on my He-Man, because my brain was like, it's the same figure, so he'll look amazing. And then that year where they came out with the actual figure, but it was all about me absolutely needing to get it before it left the shelf.
100%.
So below the headquarters command center, we've got this. We've got a triptych row here of the battlefield accessories, the battle stations, and then the APC on the right.
So I'm trying to remember. I had the top left battle station as a kid.
Now
I have. I think all now.
Yeah. Well, you have Jeremiah. You have everything. Listeners. Well, if you don't, it's been first of all, let's cover. I'm sure I covered this in my prequel, the prequel that I record before this hosts. But let me say this in this interview: Jeremiah is the foremost Joe and other toy collector that I personally know. We met through this show. I'm so happy that we did, because he has become one of my very good friends out here in California and in life. Between me and him and Paul Galliano, all friends of the show. You hear me mention him a lot. We talk G.I. Joe on a text chat way too much than I ever thought I'd ever be doing.
the random 2 a.m.
Yeah. Random G.I. Joe thoughts, or hey, look who I made on WW2K3. Jeremiah is a great guy. He's a very good friend, and his collection of Joe stuff is unparalleled. It's phenomenal. So you saying, "Oh, I think I have the machine gun defense unit," I'm like, "Oh, I think you forgot that you probably have 3 of them."
I'm getting close. I'm getting close to being 100% complete on the original run of Joe's. Yeah. Or the 80s, 90s run, I should say. Yeah.
You have an amazing collection. So it's the machine gun defense unit, the missile defense unit, and the mortar defense unit. I had the mortar defense unit.
Yeah.
I know that for sure. I think I had the missile defense at one point. No, you know what? No, I don't think I did, because the missile part doesn't look familiar, but the wall does. Was there another one that came with a little wall like that? Maybe I'm thinking.
So they continued this skew.
Yeah.
Moving forward. So there were other, like there was a second watchtower example that was, and the white one, there was like the white.
Right.
And with the.
Yeah. And below that we had the battle stations, which was the watchtower, the mountain howitzer, and the bivouac. I had the bivouac for sure. I played with that a lot. I like that one. I did not have the tower, and I did not have the mountain howitzer.
Yeah, I just had the one. Although that was one of the first things, I had, because 84 was the Christmas. Yeah, I had to wait till the end of 84 to get most of the stuff being offered at this point. I had the Zartan early, like I had to get that the second I saw it.
Oh yeah.
And I get Duke, likewise, had to get Duke the second I actually found him in stores.
My guys used to just take naps. I mean, the bivouac has a cot. So, like, they'd just be like, I'm tired. I'm going to go take a nap.
I mean, that is an interesting play toy.
Art imitates life, Between that and then the bed in the headquarters cell, which I had the headquarters, the bed there in the bivouac, I was like, G.I. Joe and Cobra, they like to nap, they like to take some rests, they're very into relaxation.
It's a very hard knock life being a Joe.
I don't remember He-Man having any beds. Did He-Man have beds? They did not.
No, I think He-Man only had one actual chair outside. Well,
they had a chair. Yeah, they had a chair. They had certainly vehicles to sit on, but they didn't come with beds.
No.
Transformers didn't have beds.
Part of that, though, I mean, beds were a big part of the 60s, Joe.
Beds,
right?
Beds, sleeping.
Yeah.
Oh, you mean with the adventure team? Do you mean? Did they have a lot of cots?
They had a lot of cots and accessories and pillow things, and
that's hilarious.
You know what I mean?
You that makes total sense. Barbie, and I mean this not in it's a doll way. Barbie had a ton of beds. Barbie had a lot of, home decor stuff, so that they would try to emulate that with G.I. Joe. That makes total sense.
Yeah, and like when you go just up above, buying them a change of outfit or the figure itself, like the bed was sort of the right size. Right. Vehicles were a bit too big for 12-inch.
Right. Yeah. I can see that. The other before we move on, because then we also have the APC, and that would have been the previous year. We love the APC. That was where I stored all my Joes when I was done playing. So they always went back in there with their seatbelt on.
And likewise, that was a Christmas '84 get for me.
I really love the APC. The APC I almost did when I purged my stuff, 20 years ago for space purposes. I actually did almost keep the APC. That's how much I loved it, because it was a constant. That was probably the most played with vehicle, because that's where I kept the Joe. So they always started their missions from the APC.
So one thing, I don't know if you've ever seen, but, because over in Europe, this stuff was being repurposed for Action Force storylines. So a lot of the same vehicles of this era and same figures too, were being reproduced, but in different colors. And that APC is the Action Force version of it. It's very cool.
Is it? What color is it?
It's more green. Yeah,
I'm going to
try
Google
to
it right
search
now.
for it online. I have both, actually, the Action Force headquarters. I don't have a lot of the Action Force variants, but I do have the APC and the
Oh, wow. You're right. Listeners, Google just the words Action Force APC. It is great. It is completely the same thing, but it's basically all green. Oh, and they give there's a different, unless this is some kind of custom thing. There's like the top gun part is different.
No, the top's a different, yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, that does look really cool. That looks
so that
really
one,
cool.
like, particularly pops the way they did it.
Uh-huh. That's nice. Well, what I also really liked about as a kid, what I identified with these portions of the catalog was it instructed you didn't have to do it this way, but for me it was, Blowtorch always hangs out in the bivouac.
Right.
Roadblock hangs out with the machine gun, looks like Mutt is on the missile defense system. So it would assign people, so it's almost it's guiding you in your play, right? You certainly didn't have to do it, and I'm sure most kids didn't, but like for me, my brain always worked in a little bit of like, give me some guide rails, and I love running with that because it makes me feel like I'm more authentic, like I'm playing more in line with what they're supposed to be versus He-Man running around with Luke Skywalker kind of stuff, which I never did.
And the question is too, do you think you leaned in more on the catalog version of that or the box art?
Right.
Version?
Yeah, it's a good question. Yeah. Well, here's the thing. The catalog stayed with me. The box art got thrown away.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'd look at the box art on the stores, and then once I got it, and then it would be gone. The catalog, I was always looking through this.
Going back to.
Yeah, and you're looking through it, and you're circling things, and you're crossing things out that you have. Yeah, honestly, it might have been the catalog more in this case. Certainly not when it came to drivers.
Oh no,
the drivers were the drivers. Like, if Flint was going to drive something that like if Flint was going to drive the Polar Battle Bear, I would have to have Snowjob. Well, he technically wasn't a driver, I guess, but like, you know what I mean. Like whoever the driver was, I would have to have the new character say, "Hey, cross country, I'm taking over the Havoc. I'm driving today."
Look, no matter who's going with him, Crankcase is driving that All-Striker.
Awesome. Yes, always. Crankcase always drove absolutely always drove it. Yeah, 100%. So then the next section here it's the meat and potatoes. It's the actual figures we all love, and they've got again, a triptych row. So first they've got the accessory packs, which I want to talk about in a second. But the top section is the 82, 83 figures. And, they look great and certainly great for a cross reference. But then the bottom section, they give a full breadth dynamic look at some of the new figures. Not all of them, but some of the new figures. Blowtorch, Roadblock, Spirit, Ripcord. Oh, no, it is. It's all of them, right? Yeah, no, it totally is.
I think it should be all of them except for the drivers, obviously.
Yeah, you know what? There was a glare, actually. There's a glare. I missed Dukes. I was like, Dukes got to be in there. Yeah, Duke's there. Rakondo, Mutt and Junk, Baroness, Scrap Iron, Firefly, and Storm Shadow.
Yeah, and like I said, when you look at this, as I said, it's a debate on what the greatest year of Joe could be. Right. I think there's a strong argument for 85 with that lineup of Flint and Lady J and
awesome
so many
guys
and the awesome Snake Eyes. But when you look at the Cobra side, this is as solid as it gets.
Yeah.
Like 82, you had Cobra Commander. 83, you had Destro. Obviously as iconic as it gets. But this year, you got Baroness, Storm Shadow, Firefly, who, to me, sort of the Boba Fett of the Joes. Like,
it really totally
cool
is.
Looking. Not necessarily a lot of great story around him, but just such an iconic look. And Scrap Iron is, nothing to dismiss.
Well, yeah, we've Scrap Iron's come up a few times on the show of one of those characters that is great and severely underused. throughout all of the iterations, cartoon, comic book. He's awesome. He's a great looking character. When we talked Iron Grenadiers, I love the concept that he actually was in continuity, kind of a prototype Iron Grenadier, because he worked for Destro. And
I heard that. Yeah, I did hear that episode. Yeah.
You're so right, and it also includes Zartan here, because he's later on he's packaged. They show him with the chameleon. But obviously Zartan's an A-list all-timer, A+ action figure, period. Let alone G.I. Joe character.
And there's something interesting with the Zartan, which I was going to hold off on.
Hold off on that. Yeah,
okay,
we'll get to hold off on that. We'll get to him. And on the Joe side, for me, Blowtorch has always popped because of those colors and the peculiar nature, like the circular, I guess heat sinks is what they were, that they gave to his character, and then you throw in the fact that his face mask plugs into his chest, and his gun, his flamethrower, plugs into his backpack. You get 2 plugins on this tiny 3 3/4 figure. I was on board, man. Like, I love a good plug-in. That was it. Like, you give me a microphone to pop into their helmet, I'm in. You give me a hose, I'm in. Blowtorch had 2 of them. Stop it.
And with Blowtorch, it's the entire assembly that you have to have it that way.
Mm-hmm.
Like, same with Ripcord, you got to build it out. Someone like Duke, I never have the helmet sitting on Duke. He doesn't necessarily need to be having his binoculars on.
Right.
But with that Blowtorch, you need
Always.
The full accoutrement of that character to really feel it.
He and Ripcord, I rarely ever saw their faces.
Oh, yeah.
Like, rarely ever saw. There was no need to see their faces. Even Ripcord's not even jumping, and I have his face mask on him, his Halo mask on him. And then you get Spirit, obviously, and Mutt, the first 2 animals to the line.
First two animals. And animals were such a... the introduction of those sidekick animals were really great for the continuing storytelling. Like, it made those characters instantly unique, and you got 2 characters for the price of 1.
Mm-hmm.
Because Junkyard, he's his own character.
Junkyard's great.
He is as much story and empathy for that character, and coming in to save the day as anyone else on the team.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, you got 2 for the price of 1. Just love that look of Mutt.
Shirley agrees. Shirley literally chiming in when we're talking about Mutt and Junkyard. She totally agrees.
Shirley knows. She knows a quality.
She knows a quality dog action figure when she sees one. Well, and I feel like they do this. This gets done today, and they're either charging 1.5 times up, right, or twice as much. Well, we're literally seeing that with classified. However, I'll say this: obviously, the classified, like the timber and stuff, they're fully articulated animals, so it's a little bit of a different, different animal. But they didn't charge more for these figures. And they didn't skimp on the quality either, because I also see a world where a manufacturer goes, well, if we got to add the dog, then I don't want to spend as much time tooling up Mutt, so let's reuse a bunch of pieces for Mutt.
Or let's take his helmet away.
Right. Yeah, but no, they doubled down. He had the baton, he had the helmet, he had the face mask. Like, he literally is an amazing character on his own, and they give you the added value of Junkyard. And the same thing goes with Spirit. His look is just amazing, and he's got the I always loved the belt. I never played Spirit without the belt, the pouch or whatever. I don't know what we would call that, but what I would call it is a completely unnecessary accessory, and yet it was all for the same price.
All for the same price, and all. Obviously we have seen inflation over the last 40 years, of course, on everything.
Of course.
But the level of inflation on action figures is outrageous just compared to
It is.
most consumer products.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I mean, they're no longer called toys. We talked about this in a recent episode where, like, I was looking at a Super 7 and it said literally, I think it says, this is not a toy.
Probably.
It says something like, this is an adult collectible. And it's like, oh, okay. Yeah. Because we've gone that far. And that's got to, I mean, that's so much of that is a volume thing, right? Because if they were, let's just imagine a world where they were selling the same volume of classifieds that they were of these Joes, they wouldn't need to charge $25 a head.
I mean, that's absolutely a factor.
Yeah.
There's so many factors that we could do a whole podcast on just.
Yeah, that's right. We could.
We'll maybe
table that discussion, because that's the thing. If you guys haven't really gleaned, and I know I said it earlier, so I'm going to blow smoke up Jeremiah again. He's an expert in all this stuff. Like, he is the whole world, like the world of action figures. It is truly not just G.I. Joe. He's got a real great handle on pretty much every line out there, and the histories of most of them. So yeah, this kind of stuff is entirely its own conversation. So we'll close this section out with the battle gear packs. Now, I don't know if I had this year's version of the Battlefield packs, but I definitely had one of the accessory packs at some point, one if not two of them. What were your thoughts on those?
So I did not. There were many weapons that even came with the figures over the years that I would rarely take out of the box. Part of it was just because, like, I wanted to take good care of things and not lose them.
Mm-hmm.
But also just in general, like, a lot of times the, given the iconic weapons, like, those needed to be, the Dreadnought weapons, for instance, like, felt very much like that was part of their characters.
Right.
But if it was just a random gun or a random pistol, or, as I said, like Duke's binoculars, a lot of times that just went into a bin to be kept safe and then wasn't incorporated into play. So, like, spending what was, and I don't remember what the price on those were. I'm guessing they were maybe not that expensive, probably in the range of like a figure or two.
Mm-hmm.
But it would still be like, I'd rather get a figure or two versus getting more weapons.
Yeah, I think they were pretty much just, it was like the same cost as a figure.
Yeah.
Which probably was twice as profitable for Hasbro, which is smart. That's, I'm not begrudging, the smartness of it. I never liked it either. Even though now in retrospect you go, oh, cool, I got all these extra guns. But as a kid, it confused me in the sense of I was a kid who wanted every gun to be with the, I'm really painting a picture of this OCD kid who couldn't do anything that wasn't told to him on the box. But, I wanted every guy to have the gun that he came with. So then you throw in all these extra guns that look just like the original guns, but maybe they're slightly colored, they're slightly off colored. They're slightly this. And it threw me for a loop. And I was like, well, everyone has a gun already, and I don't lose those guns because, like you, I used them most of all in play, but I didn't put them away. But, like, I used them all the time. So I was like, well, who's going to use these guns because everyone already has a gun? They don't need two guns.
Well, and it's clearly, it's one of those items that they know that probably most of the kids weren't like us, and they were losing the guns.
Oh,
and they were
completely.
playing in the mud.
Yeah.
And, they were possibly setting some of their toys on fire.
Completely. And I gotta say this, they might have had even more fun than we did. I don't know. I genuinely don't know. Yeah. And in retrospect,
but as a result, they're losing their weapons constantly.
Right. In retrospect, I love the idea that they did this. I really do. And Star Wars did this too. I don't know. Probably Star Wars did it first because of Jedi. Those accessory packs for Star Wars were out, right? Because Star Wars did accessory packs, right?
Yeah, they were doing them with Empire for sure.
Yeah, so they definitely did it before G.I. Joe.
They had like mail away bags with extra weapons and things like that you could do.
So it's 100% a smart idea, but I remember not being very plussed when I got it. I was like, oh, okay, more guns. All right, I get it. Because then when you would get a something like the battle platform that came with eight M16s or whatever. So you're like, well, I already have all the. Oh, okay, all right, great. But in retrospect, mad props to these. They're doing one with the Super 7. What was it? Ultimates line?
It's the newest wave of Ultimates.
Yeah, they're releasing an accessory pack, and absolutely 100%, completely 180 degrees from my reaction as a child. I saw that and I was like, awesome, that's great.
Yeah, as a kid, I didn't need it. As a kid, I would skip things like accessory packs. I would also skip, if it was a re-release, the Tiger Force version of a character I already had.
Oh yeah. I never got into the alts because again, time was tight, and I didn't have a lot of time to fool around with alt versions of the same guy. Because
that said, if, as you said, missing a lot of the 82 and 83 characters.
Yeah.
When they would do an alt version of that, I'd be like, well, it may not be the one I want, but I got to get it. It's
true. That's a good point. But if I had an alt version of the guy, they never would be played together. Right?
Oh,
yeah. Let me think who even I would have had two of. Oh, Breaker.
Well,
when they came out,
the real exception was Snake Eyes.
True. Yes.
You got that 85 Snake Eyes, even though you had the right.
Oh yeah, 85 Snake Eyes is my favorite thing of all time.
Right, and I assume you had the original Iberviz.
I did, and he stopped being used when 85 came out.
Yeah.
He got literally permanently retired.
I think I took at the time I took the O-ring out of the 82 Snake Eyes to put into a blend that broke.
Oh, listen, don't get me started. 85. I did not understand that you could do that as I was a child. Don't even get me started on how limited my brain was to take a G.I. Joe thing apart. I took a lot of things, which is weird because I took things apart all the time. I took apart my Star Wars clock because I wanted to learn how it worked. I took apart, as soon as something would stop working, like electronically, I would absolutely take it apart and try to understand it. Never thought to take a G.I. Joe apart because I respected him too much.
Well, I never did that. A lot of people, and people obviously still do it today, but would do the kit bashing.
Yeah.
I'm going to put such and such's torso on such and such's legs and switch the arms. I never did that.
No, yeah. Again, wasn't that way on the box. Why would I possibly do that? So so let's move to the next section. And
sure.
This is a fun one. So we're getting into the vehicles, and it's really, really technically only one vehicle here. We've got the Slugger, which is the vehicle, which was cool. That came with Thunder. And then we've got the twin battle gun, the Whirlwind, and the Cobra Asp. And what's great about these two things, they both are tow vehicles.
Right.
So they've got the wheels that you could pop up and pop down to plant them in place, or you can pop them back up and attach them to your Cobra Stinger or your G.I. Joe Vamp and carry them around. I only had a Stinger. I never had a Vamp. I never had a Vamp. So I only also had the Asp. I never had the Whirlwind.
I actually did not have any of these vehicles as a kid. And likewise didn't have the Vamp. I did have the Stinger. I got the Thunder because later on, I think like a year later, they offered a lot of the vehicle drivers as ways by themselves.
Yeah, they did.
Yeah. But I didn't have any of these.
I never had the Thunder or the Slugger, to be honest, until my good friend Doug Graham in circa 2006 gave me a Slugger because he's like, I cleaned it out my house. Look what I found at my mom's place, and he gave me a Slugger. That was the first Slugger I ever owned, and I was like, awesome. I'm okay. But I love it. I've always liked the Thunder figure, though. I always thought he was a cool look. Didn't he have the monocle thing on his chest?
Yeah, the visor.
The visor. Yeah, that's what it was. Yeah, I always liked Thunder. I thought he was cool. It's funny in this picture. It's both Thunder and Airborne, two dudes that I admired from afar but never had as a kid. And I can't tell from this picture. Is it a Cobra Trooper that's sitting in the Asp? I can't tell.
It's a Cobra officer, I believe.
Okay.
Yeah, the silver. Looks like it's got the silver.
That's cool. And then just the idea that you have these accessories to accessories. You have these vehicles that clamp onto the previous year's. Although, did they do? Was the Vamp? Oh, the Stinger was this year, and the Vamp
The
Mark
Stinger
II.
was this year's
So that was
release.
great. Yeah, so these were great
Yeah.
accompaniments to those two. Right.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
it's so smart. And
So Vamp was still on the market.
Yeah.
Stinger was brand new. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's just really smart by Hasbro, because now you're getting people who, the parents don't even know, and they're like, oh, I bought you this gun, it swivels or whatever, it's blue, and then the kid turns to him and goes, well, I got to hook it up to something. Now you got to go get me the Stinger. It's
100%.
It's so smart. So the next section is probably the all-time greatest G.I. Joe toy.
It has. I mean,
It's in the conversation.
It's 100% in conversation.
Yeah.
It might be the winner.
Yeah, it's a play set. It's a storage for your toy set. It is. It's a vehicle with sincere firepower.
It really floats.
Really floats, which I absolutely used all the time in the bathtub.
Absolutely.
The hovercraft we're talking about, of course, the killer whale.
That was the best thing you could do to make the bath time interesting and turn into a prune.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Having this whale.
We grew up with one bathroom, so I'd get banged on the door. I'm like, what are you doing? And I was too young for it to be anything other than playing G.I. Joe. I'm like, oh, I'm playing G.I. Joe.
Yep.
No,
same thing. Yeah. But yeah, you could load this, similar to the APC, so many characters you can stick on the inside.
Oh, yeah.
But you have characters prominently, positioned, in the main area that you can see.
The swivel missile racks. The
the
ejector buttons on the front.
Yeah, you got the sled that shoots out.
Yep. The door,
motorcycle in the back.
Yep. The door that flips open and down to make a real entrance landing thing for the front. The swivel missile racks, the 4x4s are fabulous.
They're fabulous. They're also fragile.
Yes.
As they age. So this was as just to reinforce what we just said, one of the greatest vehicles, if not the greatest.
Yeah, and we didn't even mention the turbines work.
Turbines worked. Yep, turbines worked, and also, the construction on dropping the the bombs off the side was great, because it would be you would drop one at a time.
Yes.
It wasn't something where, so many vehicles or play sets, you'd open up that drop mechanism and they'd all just fall out without any control. This, you could drop them one at a time.
Completely.
As part of the construction of it.
Yeah.
Did you
store your file cards in the base?
I had a shoebox.
Yeah. Well, the bottom of this was, I think it was meant to store your file cards, because it's file card shaped, right?
I don't know if that was the intention, because if so, they're gonna get soggy.
Well, that's true. That was going to be my next question. Did you ever forget that you had file cards in there? It's been a few years since I've seen mine, and I seem to recall that's where I would keep a certain number of them. I didn't have, but because it was, I believe, the same size, so I would keep some file cards in there. But yeah, if you forgot, then you ruined your file cards, which I'm sure
I think for me, that underneath was more like if I was taking this vehicle somewhere, it was an air place to stick figures.
Oh yeah, right.
Yeah. So you just have
the whale was used so prominently in the TV show and in the comic book a ton. It's an all-timer. It's an absolute all-timer. I think the Sky Striker are neck and neck. This probably beats out the Sky Striker, just because the sheer number of play points and characters that get involved in the conversation.
And also, it came with Cutter, who's not like a standout character by any means, but the only, I believe, I'm fact-checking myself as I'm thinking about it, but I'm pretty sure the only Coast Guard representation in the G.I. Joe team.
Oh, wow. That's cool.
And actually, so my dad was in the Coast Guard briefly, right out of high school. Part of it was because he could tell that we were probably about to end up in this situation called Vietnam, and he didn't really want to go do that. So he thought, well, I'll sign up for the Coast Guard. But yeah, I took him a few years ago to one of the Joe Cons that was at Disney World, and it was more just, I mean, he didn't care about G.I. Joe really, but it was more like he just wanted to go to Disney World. So I was like, all right, well, tag along, we'll do half the week at Disney World and half the week at Joe Con.
Yeah.
But he specifically like went out of his way to look for a Cutter figure.
Oh, that's cool.
Of his own. So yeah, that's the one.
And Cutter would go on, of course, to fight the scourge of drugs.
Of course, yeah.
Of course.
No, he's very civically minded.
Civic-minded Cutter, yeah. And so right below the hovercraft, then you get the Cobra water moccasin, which is a absolute top tier Cobra toy.
Top tier, and like we were just talking about the whale in terms of as a vehicle, one of the greatest. But I think in terms of box art, to me, the water moccasin box art has to rank right up there.
Yeah. It really is conceptually, it is 100% the hovercraft shrunk down to half scale. It's got a lot of the same play points in it. Obviously, it doesn't have ejector seats and stuff like that. But you've got the spinning rotors, you've got the two cannons on the front, you got a guy in a swivel base. I wouldn't be surprised. Is it the same mold for the swivel gun? No, it's a little different.
I don't know.
It looks a little different, but it's the same concept though. And 100% this matches up, like where even conceptually, where G.I. Joe is this big government-backed fighting force and Cobra these scrappy terrorists, their version of the whale is going to be, smaller, lighter, more manageable, more maneuverable. They're going to have 15 of these versus one whale because that's, those are even odds kind of things. It's such a great toy.
Such a great toy. And, again, if you couldn't afford the whale, possibly you could afford this.
Yeah, completely. It's too bad they don't
have a similar level of fun.
Yeah, the one thing I wish in these catalogs they had like MSRPs as well. Smart not to include it, by the way, but that would be fun for historical purposes.
Right. I'm pretty sure on Yojo you can probably look some of that up, like some of those guides.
Yeah. I always loved the way that you put Copperhead into the moccasin, where it was the clear glass that just would like dome off. And that was such a unique way to get your guy in there, and frankly provided probably the most cover for a G.I. Joe driver for a long time to come, for or any G.I. Joe or Cobra driver. Even if you look at the asp was wide open.
Yeah,
it had roll cage, but no glass.
I mean, and obviously part of it's because you want to see the figures, but the level of exposure that so many of these vehicle drivers have is frightening on both sides.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it's absolutely. I always have fun with it, but obviously it's because you want to see guys. And speaking of seeing guys, you get the Shark next, which is totally clear cockpit. I loved the Shark so much on the TV show. I never had a Shark. I recently finally got my first Deep Six, which I never knew how truly immobile Deep Six was.
He's just a big hunk of plastic.
Yeah, I never knew that until like a couple of years ago when I finally got my hands on one.
Yeah, I was in the same boat. Didn't have a Shark as a kid. Didn't have. I did get Deep Six maybe late in childhood, like it was one of his garage sale pickups.
Yeah.
But yeah, whenever I did get him, actually. No, you know what? Let me take that back. I didn't get him as a kid. I got him as an adult for the first time because the 89 Deep Six was my first Deep Six.
I've been trying to make his figure on the WWE 2K3 and those the wrestler mods that I've been making. There is no comp for a giant robot body that they have because I want to make them as robotic as possible. So I think I might have to go to the later versions of Deep Six, which bothers me because I really want to figure out a way to do this. But it is so immobile There is just no way to put that on a human being.
I mean, you could always go with, some of the ones they did in 25th anniversary is a little bit more toned.
Yeah.
But
I think that's probably where I'll end up going. I loved the shark so much as a kid from the show that when I played, do you remember the Atari game River Raid?
Not specifically, no.
Okay. River Raid was a little amphibious aircraft that was shaped exactly like a shark, and you rode up the river shooting tankers and helicopters, and so it was amphibious. You knew it was amphibious because you would fight helicopters and you would fight planes and then you would fight boats. So that made, in my headcanon to this day, River Raid a G.I. Joe game. River Raid is absolutely a G.I. Joe game where you're in a shark, you're fighting fangs, you're fighting Cobra tankers, you're fighting Cobra jets. To this day, when I go back and retro play River Raid, it is a G.I. Joe game flying a shark. If there's anyone out there that ever had that same thought process, please, please, please ping me on social media and let me know, because I can't be the only one alone. River Raid was my all-time favorite game. That was because it was a shark and I loved the shark so much. But I never had the figure. Never had the toy.
Yeah. Yep. Nope. Never had it.
Yeah.
And as I said, even, I always, as a kid, I had it in my mind that I wanted every character.
Yeah.
Had to have every character. So I would often chase the figures. Of course, wanted the vehicles, but sometimes would skip the vehicles just to make sure I had as many of the characters and figures as I had.
Mm-hmm.
So if vehicle that didn't come with a character, I might skip it just because, that's not getting me one more step towards the thing I feel like I have to complete.
Yeah, that's true. I hear that.
But yeah, this vehicle was one I did not get until I was an adult, and same with Deep Six.
Now, when you did it, did you submerge it? Like, did you use the
Actually,
bellows that came with it?
No, actually, I haven't. Never even occurred to me, but actually, now that you mention it.
Well, keep me posted. I'll update this on a later show. So rounding out this side of the catalog, we've got some cool little, like, these would have been lower price point weaponry / toys. It's the Pack Rats, the programmable robotic machines, which they were out the previous year, correct? Because they were in one of the early cartoons.
They were definitely into Revenge of Cobra, but Revenge of Cobra was 84.
Oh, it was 84. Okay, so was this the first year for the Pack Rats?
I'm trying to remember.
Actually. Well, you know what? I mean, I'm on Yojo right now, and I think they were 83. Yeah. Yeah, they were 83.
Okay.
So this would have been a holdover, which I eventually did get those, but I know I didn't get them early on. I got them a little later in their life. But I absolutely had a Cobra Claw, which is great.
I actually, this will be shocking to you, Joe. I still don't have them.
A Cobra Claw or a Pack Rat?
No, the Pack Rats.
Well, aren't they hard to get? That is shocking to me, but they're hard to get now, right?
I don't know that I've looked all that.
They were very fragile. There's pieces on them that are portions of them, obviously, like all this stuff that were real fragile. So if I'm recalling this correctly, on the flamethrower Pack Rat, the leg extensions, the piece the plastic that wrapped around the bar to keep everything together, that snapped a lot. Mine definitely were snapped when I sold them. And then the missiles themselves, they look great because they're two-tone, but because of that, they're a little more fragile because you have two pieces on the missile. So it's a little more prone to snapping or getting lost for the missile launcher. And then you've got there's an antenna on them. Like there's all these little bits and bobs on these. I think they're a little more expensive to get these days.
Yeah. They're one of those things where, because again, not fully complete. I'm close, but having not had them and probably intentionally skipping them to chase after figures instead. Yeah. And I also don't recall any friends or neighbors having them.
Yeah. They weren't.
So they just don't pop in my mind.
You're right. but they were used on that cartoon, so it's like they definitely were trying to push them. But I agree, I don't think they sold very well. Now the Cobra Snake, which is that big body armor cobra, obviously heavily used in the cartoon, where especially the part where Snake Eyes had to get the radiation, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. No, that's an iconic piece, which I did not have at the time.
I didn't have either. I got one very recently in box, and it's awesome.
Again,
but never had it as a kid. And they made one. They made a version of this that was blue too, right? Wasn't that like the next year they made a blue one?
Yeah, there's blue, and then I'm trying to remember, was there a black one that was part of the later iterations, or was that only in the first?
Well, you know what? We're spending too much time on it because that was also 83.
Oh, true.
Yeah. So really, the only new one here is the Cobra, is the Claw, which obviously that is completely iconic, and that is on the level of Sky Strikers, and Fang is obviously great, but there's so many images of Cobra Commander flying that, and like it was like Cobra Commander's personal wingsuit in my brain,
So iconic, and also the only vehicle, I'm pretty sure, that as a kid I had multiples of.
Oh, cool.
Didn't army build obviously as a kid because you have limited funds and limited access, so you're going to try to get something unique every time if you can.
Right.
But yeah, that's the one thing that I think I had 3 of.
Wow, that's awesome. I had one of those. And there were some like the leg pieces, I think, or like not the leg, the wheel joint thing, I think was a little fragile.
Yeah, one of them was damaged.
Yeah.
But I think somehow, I got them from different people for birthday gifts. Like people didn't communicate with one another to make sure they weren't getting things.
But what a great piece of design though from Hasbro, in that you could have easily made that just a one piece, snap together, but like basically a one piece kind of electric glider, or whatever. But they add that piece where the wings pop out on the side. Not a whole much, maybe 1/4 of an inch, 1/2 an inch.
Well,
but in your head as a kid, that's all the difference. You're like, whoa, pop the wings out. Now it's really going fast,
that is part of it. And, I think, we touched on earlier, but, for you and me and probably most of the people still obsessing about G.I. Joe as adults, story and character is what draws us in.
Yeah.
And keeps us going and keeps us coming back for more. But there's also just the psychology of like kids wanting to discover the tactile sense of the world at that age and control things. And like, as a child, there's this, you don't have a lot of control over your life. People decide when you eat and sleep and what you eat and when you sleep and when you go to school and what you're going to wear today. And a lot of them are sort of searching for just little sensations and little things to experience of like, oh, I can pull this thing out.
Yeah.
And it does what I want it to do.
Mm-hmm.
And that's sort of part of too, when it comes to like toy design for kids, if it's, I want to brush Barbie's hair, and that means I want to feel the hair and, change the clothes and do all these things that, just to sort of like play with having control in the world,
So true.
And that's something that like, as we get to be adults, we sort of lose that aspect of the toys, because we gain control over our own lives.
Right.
So that no longer draws us in. But for a kid, that's a big feature.
Yeah. It's also scale too.
Right.
Like pick up a baseball as an adult. That baseball feels tiny. But when you were a kid, it was the biggest thing in the world. I can't get my hands around this ball to throw a curve,
Right.
Same thing with toys. The 3 3/4 inch, we look at them now and you compare it to the classifieds, you go, oh, they're, whatever. But like, you're just smaller as a kid. So these were the biggest things in the world. And a wing popping out 1/4 of an inch might as well have been 6 feet,
100%.
Yeah. And what I always loved too about the Claw, really great insight, by the way, what you're saying there. And ladies and gentlemen, this is why Jeremiah is the king of toys, because he's 100% right with that. But the claw, following the snake thing, was you could use, like in the play world of it, you could use it with a guy inside or underneath, or it could fly on its own.
Yeah.
And it was evinced in the claw by, you could put the bomb there. And if the bomb's there, there's obviously no place for a guy to go there. So that tells you as a kid thinking this out, well, yeah, if the bomb's there, then it must be able to fly on its own, because how else would you drop the bomb? So it was like our first experience to the concept of drones, quite frankly. But what a great subtle way to remind kids that you don't need a dude in this. Cobra can just fly this remotely, and you can attack G.I. Joe with it.
And it's also, not to say it was necessarily a humanitarian effort, but it is a consideration of the fact that, like, not every family has an access to a big budget come Christmas time.
Mm-hmm.
And, just a company being at least conscious of that, maybe just so they can exploit it,
Sure.
Let's not necessarily give them too much credit, but to say, hey, this can be a complete thing in itself and still really cool and still really impressive and feel like a vehicle, feel like you didn't get left out of the vehicle game.
Yes.
On the playground,
Yeah.
And yet you can play with it on its own.
Yep. You know who does that really well today? Pokemon. At the shop, when we sell Pokemon cards, if you're at the store and there's a kid, and whatever budget that kid has, there is absolutely a Pokemon product that they can buy, from a $4 booster pack to a $10 3-pack, $15 3-pack, to a $25 like mega bundle pack, to a $35, like literally increments of 10. You go all the way up to like $100 for the mega super booster whatevers. I am so impressed by that. It is such a smart choice, just from a business perspective, because you are literally capturing every market, everyone's price point in the market you are making available. And you're literally offering they offer this, it's the same product. It's not, the bigger ones come with maybe a coin here or there, but essentially it's the same thing. And
you compare that to today with like G.I. Joe, where your starting point is $25.
Exactly. Right.
And it goes up from there.
Yeah. There's no entry point. And if you say Super 7, you're still talking $20. So there is no entry
for those
point.
Reactions.
There's no entry point for G.I. Joe under $20. You're so right. So Pokemon is a great example of that. And this is where we're going to interject and say, to be continued, everyone. Jeremiah and I had so much fun discussing this. We lost track of time, and it was an hour. So let's split it into 2 parts. Come back next week. You're going to learn a whole lot more about the 84-85 catalog. And listen, they did so many catalogs. They did 82, 83. They did catalogs pretty much for the entirety of the line. So I know some of those are your favorites. So let's get into them, get talking about them. So reach out to me and make sure you get your place in line to talk about your favorite catalog of G.I. Joe. And now we all know a whole lot more about the 84-85 catalog. And Joeing is half the battle.